Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Indian Nation Station pregame show right here on the Indian Nation Station, Piqua Channel 5, your home for Piqua Athletics. I'm AJ Ganger. With me, as always, Dwayne Bachman and Bob Luby back for another night of Piqua Indians football coming your way. Guys, it's homecoming night here at Alexander Stadium as the Butler Aviators are coming to town to take on the Piqua Indians. A reminder, tonight's pregame show is sponsored by Dick Lumpkin's Auto Body, Little Caesars Pizza, and Heartland Federal Credit Union. Guys, let's take a look real quick at the remaining schedule for the 2019 season for your Piqua Indians. We come in tonight on a 2-game winning streak. We're 2-2. We play Butler here tonight. It's homecoming. On October the 4th, we're at West Carrollton. On October the 11th, we are at home against Xenia. On October 18th, we are playing Greenville. That is our senior night game. And then on the 25th of October, we're at Tip City. We close the year out, as always, against the Troy Trojans at Troy. Guys, give me your thoughts on the remaining schedule for the Piqua Indians.
I see three pretty tough games ahead of us. I think Xenia's 3-1. They're looking pretty good. We keep downplaying how good Greenville is, but when you win 3 out of 4, they can't be all bad. And I tend to think the real battle is going to be the last game of the season when we play Troy. Those kids seem to be playing very, very well. There could be a lot at stake for that last game.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Dwayne. I think we're going to find a lot out about Greenville tomorrow night, or tonight actually. They're playing Troy. And we're going to see how they match up. They've done pretty well thus far, better than most people expected. But I've heard from people close to Greenville, they have 2 or 3 injuries. And they don't seem like they have much depth. And a team without much depth, an injury can really decimate them. So,
that's when you're playing somebody like Troy.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a real test for them. Xenia, again, a 3-1 football team. I think they'll be a challenge. I don't know. They just seem like the kind of team to me that could sneak up on a lot of people. And, of course, Troy. I think Troy's a pretty good football team. We'll find out again when Xenia plays Troy. We'll get a good idea about either or both of those teams.
You know, one thing I want to point out, too, is I don't think we can overlook Tip City ever. I mean, Tip City and Troy last week played to a 14-7. It was a defensive game. Tip City had a couple chances to score towards the end of the game. I mean, we cannot overlook Tip City, and that is a road game as well at their new stadium.
I agree. I think the only game maybe the Indians shouldn't have to worry a whole lot about is West Carrollton. And you hate to say that.
Yeah.
They're 0-4 now. They still have to play Greenville, Sidney, Fairborn, and Stebbins. Maybe they got a shot with Stebbins or Fairborn. Both those teams are 1-3. But
they're the only winless team in the Miami Valley League right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, if I was a betting man right now, I would say our chances of an 8-2 season and a league title are 7-3 and still maybe getting into those playoffs. They're really high on this team right now, especially if we play the same way that we just played last Friday night.
Well, I think last Friday night the game was won at the line of scrimmage. Piqua controlled the line of scrimmage offensively and defensively. Our kids were playing well. They're getting better. Although I have to be very, very honest with you, that was not a very strong Sidney ball club.
No, I agree with you, Dwayne. I think that they're playing some sophomores in the line, offensive line, and when you do that, it's going to hurt you. Unless you have a stellar sophomore, they're just at a disadvantage. They're not as big, they're not as strong, and they're not as smart. Don't have that football savvy yet. And Piqua really just destroyed their offensive line, had their backs running all over the place. I think that the Indians, I think we could be challenged tomorrow night. I think Butler is the kind of team that's, they're 2-2, but they have some weapons. They're good offensively. They struggle more defensively. We talk about that later, I guess, but just throwing that in for comment.
All right, guys, let's take a look at the Week 4 NVL Scores, brought to you by Dick Lumpkin's Auto Body. If you got a bump, call Lump. Xenia shuts out Stebbins 42-0. Troy, again, we mentioned this earlier, beat Tip City 14-7. Greenville in a close game against Fairborn 29-26. Butler played West Carrollton on Thursday night to a tune of a 41-7 victory, and our Indians of Piqua beat Sidney, shut them out 29-0 to keep the illustrious battered helmet. Guys, what are your thoughts on the games from around the league last week?
Well, I think there's very few surprises in there. I think you hit it right on the nose, AJ. The Troy Tip City game was closer than I would have imagined. I would have probably given Troy a little bit more of an edge there. So, like you say, maybe Tip City's going to get better by the time we play them, and I think that's game number 9. So, like you said, we got to be careful they don't sneak up on us because they're extremely well coached.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Greenville keeps being a kind of an enigma to me. I didn't know they were going to be able to win this many games this early, but the rest of the schedule will tell. A little surprised of where they are. Everybody else kind of fallen into place where maybe I thought things would be. I thought Troy could beat Tip. I didn't think it'd be that close. Now, the question is, did Troy not play as well as they are capable, or did Tip play better and more so than anybody expected? I haven't heard much about that game.
I'm afraid I haven't either. The score that, or the game that surprised me last Friday night's not on this sheet of paper, and that is Columbus Hartley beats Julianne. That one surprised me.
Yeah, that one was very surprising.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how strong Bishop Hartley is.
That's right.
We know how strong Chaminade is.
I think if, in Greenville, they played with Chaminade. We played with Chaminade for a little bit too until, we kind of got worn down. They're just two good football teams, really.
I talked to somebody who was at the game, saw the Greenville Chaminade game. They said it seemed as though Chaminade was almost insistent they were going to throw the football against Greenville instead of doing what they do best.
Run the ball.
Run the ball, because they got those two huge running backs that are, well, we saw them.
Yes.
They're good. They make their own holes. They become their own blockers. They knock people down, and they pick up yardage. But for whatever reason, and I don't know whether, who knows what the coach is thinking, but the guy told me he was in the stands. He said he was sitting on the Chaminade side, said the Chaminade fans were really hooting and hollering, say, run the football, run the football. Didn't do it.
Well, guys, let's take a look at the stats from our last game. Pickwa versus Sydney. This one brought to you by Little Caesars Pizza. Stop by your local Pickwa Little Caesars Pizza anytime for $5 hot and ready pizzas. Blaine Uhl only threw the ball 4 times, but he completed 3 of those 4 passes for 53 yards. One of them was a touchdown pass of 24 yards on the opening drive for the Indians to Garrett Shrub. He ran the ball 10 times for 32 and a touchdown. Karan Coleman, he still got his carries in, 17 for 86 with 2 touchdowns. Corey Miller got a lot of carries last week, 16 for 66 yards. Garrett Shrub, the 2 catches for 39 and a touchdown, one being the 24-yard touchdown. Caleb Lyons led the whole defense with 4 tackles. Hudson Hall had 2 sacks. Lance Reeve Hicks had 1 sack. Really was a half a sack. If you watched the intro video in the beginning of this, it was kind of a half a sack, but we'll give him a full one. For Sydney, Ryan Dunham, their quarterback, 7 of 14 passing for just 72 yards. 5 carries for negative 32. Obviously, those had the sacks had something to do with it. In high school and college, your rushing stats, they suffer the sacks. E.J. Davis just had 10 rushes for 53 yards, their top running back. And Jaden Swiger had 9 tackles and a sack on defense, so he was pretty much running a rough shot on defense. But we were dive up the middle, off tackle run. Dive up the middle, off tackle run. We threw in a couple options, but they didn't really do much. But running the ball up the middle there, Karan Coleman off tackle. Guys, we played a complete ball game last week.
Well, AJ, if you look at your list you gave us, there are eight Pickwa Indians and 3 Sydney Yellow Jackets.
Yeah,
just about tells you the story right there. And E.J. Davis, I'm not mistaken, he got hurt maybe late in the third quarter.
It was late.
And he's a pretty good runner, but that was just a matter of we had too many athletes. Line of scrimmage belonged to the Indians.
Well, looking at the Pickwa people, I don't know if you noticed this, AJ, last week or thought about it, you were so busy. Corey Miller, 66 yards, 16 carries. He's a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. They made him a running back because I talked to Coach Krejci afterwards, post-game. I said, Coach, haven't seen Corey involved running the football. He said, well, the only time he's ever run it, he fills in practice sometimes when they need him. I said, holy Toledo. I said, he had a career game because it seemed like he was out there all the time.
He was almost
and he plays both ways, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He plays both ways.
And he's a sophomore. Boy, I'll tell you, he impressed me. Again, Karan Coleman, like what he does. He has that burst. he gets a football, boy, and he'll hit a hole, find the daylight, and look at the next level to get past the linebackers.
And again, Blaine Hall passing 3 out of 4 times. That goes back to what you've always said. Why pass the ball if you can run the ball? And again, I hope he wasn't hurt too badly. They thought he just had the cramps.
Yeah.
And I understand he's going to be ready for the Aviators.
Yeah, he'll be okay. What happened was he explained it to me on Monday when he came into school was he kind of got dead-legged, and that caused his entire leg to just cramp up. I mean, it was a good thing for him. You're up in the game. You're up 21-0. You don't really need to put him back in and risk, more injury.
But we can't overlook the fact that the young fellow who went in for him, Halapeter, was not intimidated.
No.
He had a lot of poise, and I hate to say that it was a break for Halapeter, but it was because it gave him a little varsity playing time. I was impressed with him.
Yeah.
Oh, to me, he displayed some athleticism. When he got a hold of the football, he could scramble a little bit. And you're right. He acted like he'd been there before.
That's right.
And that's important. You need a backup quarterback because, just as we saw Friday night, you never know what's going to happen. Serious injury, minor injury, sprained ankle, get the wind knocked out. You need somebody ready to go.
And Halapeter did everything that Bill Neese would have expected out of a second-string quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
And Andrew Halapeter is used to pressure. He's a wrestler. He's been on that mat where it's you and another guy just getting ready to square off. He knows what that pressure is like. So it wasn't a surprise to me, being one of his coaches when he was in junior high, that he went in there and just answered the call without blinking an eye.
You just wonder if he's going to have to go back in somewhere along the line with all these games left. And after last Friday night, if I see Halapeter go out onto the field, I feel a little more comfortable not having seen him before Sydney. Wasn't so sure. I was very impressed with that young fella.
I feel like he's more of a known commodity now.
Yes, he is.
To me, I had no idea even who our backup was going to be.
Yeah. Well, guys, let's look at a little bit quickly here over the team stat comparison. Just numbers were just insane up and down the line. We had 21 first downs to Sydney's 8. 302 total yards for Piqua, just 91 for the Yellow Jackets. We also ran the ball 58 times for 249 yards, averaging 4.3 yards a carry. 19 rushes for Sydney, 19 yards, just averaged 1 yard a carry. They were 1 of 6 on third down. We did a heck of a lot better on third down this week than what we did in the first 3 games, going 8 of 13. We were also 3 of 3 on fourth down when we needed it. 2 turnovers for both teams. We only committed 3 penalties. Sydney's got 6 for 55. A lot of those were personal fouls. And just look at that time of possession, 33 minutes and 50 seconds to 14 minutes and 10. We controlled the ball like an Army or a Navy team does.
You don't need the scoreboard to determine who won that game.
You really don't.
If you had a copy of the stats,
Yeah.
you look at that and you say, wow, I don't think there's any question that who won the football game.
Well, the huge win for the Indians is they did keep the battered helmet and moved the series lead for them to 79 wins, 39 losses, 6 ties against Sydney. Next year's game will be the 125th meeting played at Sydney. Let's take a look at the Week 5 games around the Miami Valley League, brought to you by Heartland Federal Credit Union. We've got Greenville, who's 3-1, taking on 3-1 Troy right now. There's your division leader. For the division lead right there for the NVL in that portion of the conference. Tip City will travel to West Carrollton. Tip's obviously 1-3. West Carrollton 0-4. Xenia will play Sydney at home. Xenia 3-1. Sydney 1-3. Fairborn 1-3. Stebbins 1-3. And then our Piqua and Butler game, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. Both of them coming in at 2-2. Guys, what are your thoughts on the other games? Obviously, the big one to look out for, Greenville and Troy.
I don't think there's any question about it. That's going to be the one a lot of us are going to watch. But I still think the last one on the list, Piqua versus Butler, as long as our kids continue to play and play well, I tend to think that that game at 9 and 10 are going to be crucial. I didn't think there was a chance anybody could get to the playoffs, but by golly, now I'm not so sure, Bob.
Butler throws the ball well, and that's what really worries me. I think if they've watched any film or tape, I guess it is, or videos, we'll call it, they see Piqua struggle sometimes to cover the pass, especially the stuff in the flat, the short stuff at the sideline. And Butler's quarterback is good. He's third in the league in passing. He averages about 131 yards a game, I think, and he can make things happen. So my feeling is they're going to come out and try to throw the football. Piqua, I think, will maybe have a more of a dominating run game. So it's going to be up to Piqua to overcome that passing attack, which I think. Now, what do I know? I'm not, on the Butler staff, but just using football sense, my guess is that's what they'd like to do.
Yeah.
Well, they've thrown the ball 66 times in 4 games, Bob. So they're not afraid to put it in the air.
No.
And it's Luke Mitchell, their quarterback, 34 for 66. Not too bad, but I think you're right. I think our defensive secondary is going to be tested against these Aviators.
And I think also we're going to have to start throwing the ball downfield more. We only threw 4 times against Sydney?
4 times. Hollier didn't attempt a single pass when he came in.
We're going to run into some people defensively that may do a better job at taking our run game away from us, and I think we're going to have to be able to get it downfield. Whether how that's going to work out, who knows? But I think even though I like to run the football, and like I told you, why throw it when you can run it? Still, in the back end of that whole playbook is, folks, we may have to throw a little more just to keep people honest and to improve your passing game. The mechanics of it.
Well, I think Garrett Shrub is going to have to be more of the passing game. He's got good hands. He's tall, and I tend to think that maybe Blaine Ull's going to have to look at number 6 because he might be ready for a big game, and this could be it.
I agree with you guys. Well, let's look at it tonight's game real quick. It's homecoming night, number 1, so that's big. Got some people coming back. We've got our king and queen candidates. I believe the queen is going to be announced on Friday night during halftime. We look back at the past 5 meetings between these two teams. Butler has won 3 of those last 5, including last season where the Indians were trailing 27-0 at halftime, and Butler ended up winning that game 27-25, and our comeback fell short. We would score a touchdown with 7:48 left to play, fail a 2-point conversion, and also have another chance towards the end of the ball game, but we weren't able to get it in. Tonight's a different story, though. Butler is the 3rd best rushing offense in the Miami Valley League, while Piqua sits at number 5. Piqua's defense is the 2nd best in the NVL when it comes to stopping the run, while Butler is the 4th best defense in overall defense. Piqua's 4th best in overall. Butler is 3rd in rush defense. It's going to be a game where 2 teams are going to try to run the ball. There's no question about that. But it's also a game where 2 defenses just thrive on stopping that run. In my opinion, it's going to be a good old-fashioned smash-mouth Miami Valley League from the 70s football game where they run the ball down the throat, then the defenses are going to bust that middle and stop that run. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it's going to be another low-scoring game. I don't think there's any question. The defenses are going to dominate probably for both teams. I would look for a 21-14 type game. I don't see a 50 or 40 points out of either one of these 2 teams.
But we also thought last week that it was going to be a low scoring, and we ended up scoring 29 to Sydney's 0. So
I question or I wonder about Butler's defense. They're 7th in the league, and they may have their hands full trying to stop the Piqua run game. I think you're going to see a blending of passing and running by Vandalia. And another thing, for whatever reason, Vandalia seems to match up pretty well against Piqua.
Right.
We always struggle with them. And I remember when Smeezing was a senior, I don't know if you remember that game, Dwayne, we were down. He stole the ball from
I remember that.
ball carrier.
Yeah.
Was like a recovered fumble, but he took it out of his hands.
Yeah.
And they were on their way for another score. I mean, they were moving the heck out of the football. So, as I said, for whatever the reason, Vandalia matches up well against us. They do something that gives us a lot of problems.
It's been a very competitive series
for
a long time.
And speaking of that game 2 years ago, I mean, we're looking at a completely different style of offense than what that was. We had a quarterback in Austin Davis back then that had an arm, a cannon, and had a receiver in Hayden Shrub, Garrett's brother, who could just beat DBs with no problem. You had Ben Smeezing, who's that hard smash mouth player. Last year, we ran more of a spread because we had Micah Karn, who was more of a read option type quarterback. Yep. And then this year we kind of go back to that, but we haven't seen Blaine throw the ball a whole lot. We don't actually know what his arm strength is. Just like you said, I think to win this game, we are going to have to throw that ball down the field because obviously Butler's defense really good at stopping and run, so is ours. But I think both teams have problems in their DBs and secondaries to where if we can exploit those problems and Garrett can get behind those DBs, we should be pretty good.
Well, for whatever the reason, Butler's given up some points this year. They gave up 38 to Harrison in the opener, 35 to Troy. They lost 35-14. Now, does that tell us something, the difference between Troy and Butler? To me, it does right now.
Sure.
Wilmington they destroyed Wilmington. They scored 57.
But it was close till the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And, of course, they beat West Carrollton 41-7. Another thing about Butler, they have a receiver by the name of Ryan Wilson. And he's got 14 receptions. He's caught 4 touchdown passes. And he's first in the league in receiving. So that tells you he's their go-to guy. And we're going to have to watch him lining up because, they'll try to get the ball in his hands. You want the people who are successful to have the football, whether it's a running back, whether it's a running quarterback, or it's a receiver. And they're going to find a way to try to get Ryan Wilson the football.
Let's talk a little bit about Blaine Uhl. I tend to think that Blaine's done a nice job through the first 4 games. Good leadership, hasn't turned it over much, and again, has not had to run it very much, but I think Blaine's done a nice job for Piqua, and I think he's going to have to continue to be the leader that we need.
Oh, no question about that. He's a kind of kid. He's a smart kid. He's got a good football mind, and he lives in a house where they talk about football all the time.
Yeah.
When they sit down at the supper table, they're not talking about anything else probably but football, which is a good thing. So he knows what to do with the football, and I think he's getting better each week, and that's what you want from your quarterback. And, they always say, does the quarterback get too much credit and too much blame? I don't think so. I think when a quarterback plays well and when a quarterback plays poorly. You can't blame a defensive tackle if your quarterback's throwing picks all the time or fumbling the football. He's got to make plays, and that's what you're going to expect out of him. Another thing I think, how much effect does homecoming have on a football game? You got to keep your guys focused on the game. And, sometimes that gets out of whack. They start thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow instead of what's going to happen Friday night. We've been through that. I've been through that before.
And homecoming and halftime is going to be longer just because of homecoming, too. I think it's five minutes longer than what it normally is.
Yeah. And, again, you hope it's not a disruption. You want everything to go well, but it is a football game, and your football players have to remember that.
Well, Bob, here's another thing. We talked about the record of 2-2. We got off to an 0-2 start, and everybody was a little discouraged. Most people have forgotten the first 2 because we have the 2 wins, and the win last Friday night against Sydney was pretty impressive, and I think the fans in the stand, and by the way, I think we'd be remiss if we did not compliment the number of Sydney fans who came to Alexander Stadium, plus the fine crowd we had at Pickle. That was probably the biggest crowd we've had in this stadium in a long, long time.
You're right. Again, I think that we're going to have a good football game on our hands Friday night. And the Indians, with a young team, we haven't really talked much about the youth of this football team. I glanced at the roster. I double glanced. Mm-hmm. And I think I counted about 11 seniors.
Yeah, there's not very many seniors on this year's team.
It's a young team that performs at a pretty good level. So, they keep getting better, and we've talked about that. When you're young, you're learning, you're a good athlete, you're going to improve from week to week.
And again, Bob, as you look at the starting lineups for Vandalia Butler, they've got they're sprinkling with sophomores, a couple juniors as well. So we might have two teams that are about the same age.
Are my sophomores better than your sophomores? That's what it boils down to, huh?
We'll find out.
Yeah, and we got some good people. We got some real good people that play hard and just make plays, and that's all you can ask.
I think people who wondered how good the Indians were going to be were basically converted last Friday night. I happened to be one of them because we dominated the game, even though Sydney wasn't very strong. You have to consider the fact that our kids seem to be getting better every week. That's coaching, and that's just about what any coach would expect to have. Tomorrow night will be a good test.
Well, what scared me about Sydney, they had the leading ground gainer in the league. And, you always think there's a way or something had to happen to make him the leading ground gainer. We found out that he wasn't going to be the leading ground gainer last Friday night, and we shut him down. Our kids played well. I agree with you, Dwayne. Huge, huge win.
And guys, we also want to thank all of the alumni who played on NVL Piqua teams who came back. I believe we had people from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s in the crowd. They were honored in between quarters of ball. So that's amazing. We had people from the 1940s come out there.
You're right.
And be a part of those festivities.
Had somebody drove in from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania just for that.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It was a huge crowd. The student section was packed. It was rocking. There's no atmosphere like a packed house at Alexander Stadium on a Friday night for a football game, guys.
I was surprised at the Sydney crowd, to be real honest
Yeah.
with you. They haven't done anything significant over the first three games. I thought the crowd would be kind of slight. They put a lot of people in the stands.
It's a rivalry game, man.
Yeah,
Just pick
and they
with Sydney,
should.
I guess.
And they should, Dwayne. That's what's bothered me. If anything's bothered me about the GWAC and the way things went, people didn't follow their team. Piqua supports, and I talked to a mother, and she says, I found that I go to away games. Piqua crowd really turns out, and it's her first year involved in the program. And I said, yeah, they do. And she said, based on what returns here when we play somebody,
That's right.
people, for whatever reason, don't come up.
A lot of it could be the distance, and now with the NVL, the farthest we travel, I believe, is Xenia for any sport. And I mean, even then, we're still going to travel in droves, even parents and students going to watch.
They find a way. I know you get off work at 5 o'clock, game starts at 7. You have to scramble if you're coming from Springboro or some seaport in the south there. It's a haul.
And again, Bob, I think it's very obvious to me the MVL was a good move for all 10 schools in those two divisions.
Good decision. And even though probably some people didn't like it, I think it was best for the school, the kids, and everybody involved.
I think you're right.
Well, guys, any final thoughts on this for tonight's game before we get off here?
Well, again, I predicted Piqua 21-14 last Friday night. I was a little off, but I got the winners. I think the Indians are going to prevail. I think it could be maybe a one-touchdown difference again.
I think Piqua will put some points on the board just without me seeing Vandalia, just looking at their defense, 7th in the league. I think Piqua's going to find a way to put some points. I'm going to say 28-21.
I'm going to say 28-14. I'm thinking we're going to come out almost the exact same way we did last week, play that complete game. We're not going to shut them out. I mean, it's really hard to shut out a team. I mean, Sydney was knocking on the door before Jarrell Lewis came in there and just took the ball away from the running back, and, we still shut them out. I don't think it's a really hard thing to do 2 weeks in a row, let alone one game. But I'm thinking 28-14 Indians are going to get the win, and we're going to go to the 3-2.
And I think we all agree that the Indians right now have the momentum going for them. Vandalia Butler's always been a tough opponent. It ought to be interesting.
It's going to be a great game.
Sure is, yeah.
Well, thank you guys for watching the Indian Nation Station pregame show here on the Indian Nation Station, Piqua Channel 5. It's your home for Piqua Athletics. We'd like to thank our sponsors one more time, Dick Lumpkin's Auto Body, Little Caesars Pizza, and Heartland Federal Credit Union for being sponsors for the fall sports season. Stay tuned for the game coming up next right here on the Indian Nation Station. For Bob and Dwayne, I'm AJ Ganger saying good night and go Indians.